All right, so I'm gonna be making a tier list video on some of the vintage clothing brands that I have found at the thrift store that I, for the most part like, and I'm just gonna rank them on what I think is the best and what I think is valuable to either have as like clothes to wear or to resell. So first thing, you can go. It doesn't matter. First thing, vintage clothing is basically like any clothes that it's at least 20 years old. So what is that, 2002 or older? So as long as it's been made before 2002, then it's technically considered vintage in clothing. And another cool thing about vintage clothes is a lot of some of the nicer things that you're going to find aren't brands that you're typically going to know. Like we found like handmade pieces or things that you find at flea markets that like you've never heard of before, and that's part of the fun. That's part of like the amazing part of searching and finding cool vintage pieces. A lot of these brands you're going to be able to find at the thrift stores like Goodwill, Salvation Army, or like Savers or anything like that. But some of these are going to be a little harder to find, so you might have to go on eBay or Poshmark to search them, unless you're just a legend at the bins. All right, so yeah, we're just going to start off. We'll start with Carhartt. This is kind of hard, actually, now that I have all these brands and I'm just looking at them. But yeah, I think Carhartt is pretty valuable. Nothing like too crazy that you're gonna find unless you find like a jacket or something like that I think could be really valuable. I'm gonna put them in B tier for now. I think that's a pretty safe spot for them. And then I'll do Dickies next because that's like the closest thing. There's a lot of other work brands that I think are really awesome, like Red Cap, and there's a lot of other brands that you can find. But Red Cap is probably my favorite to find out of these three. I didn't put them on here because it's so similar. But Dickies I'm also going to put in B tier right behind Carhartt because I think Carhartt is a little bit better to find than Dickies, maybe unless you're a skater. I guess that's like the only exception, but I feel like as far as quality goes, I think Carhartt might be just like a tiny bit above Dickies in most things, like in like all categories of clothing. I'm not just talking pants. I'm just talking like even jackets or like even t-shirts. But then again, it depends on what you're trying to do. Like if you want to print on something, then like Dickies jackets. Like I know there's this brand called Basket Case, and they print on like Dickies jackets, like the zip jackets with lining on the inside, and that's like so sick. I have a friend who has some of their stuff, and that's like one of the coolest things I've seen like a brand do. So next is Gap. I have Gap and Old Navy in like the same category. I've found like some of my favorite things that are Gap and Old Navy. As far as like if you're trying to resell, I don't think these pieces are gonna sell for a large amount of money just because they're not like anything special. Even if you like 20 years ago when you would go into Gap or into Old Navy, you're just gonna get cheap clothes. Like that's just what it is. That's what these stores are known for. But since it's like since it's a fast fashion type of brand, I think a lot of their vintage stuff is really cool, and some of it's decently high quality. So I love finding Gap or Old Navy. All right, so I have the Cleveland Browns. This just is sportswear, and I think vintage sportswear is some of like the best some of the best things that you can get, especially if you're trying to resell or if you're just trying to put together a cool outfit. Also, there's t-shirts, jackets, like a lot of different layering pieces, like hoodies and polo shirts that I think are really awesome in sportswear. Not specifically like pants or anything, but yeah, as far as tops go, sportswear is like top notch, S tier, 100%. All right, next is Guess. I've been lucky enough to find some Guess at Goodwill. I think I found Guess at least 2 or 3 times just hanging on the rack and for like a relatively good price. I remember I found this Guess crew neck. It was like, I think it was a women's crew neck, but it was super old and had this like print on it that I had never seen before, and it's probably one of the coolest pieces that I've found. I think we sold it, but yeah, it's like, I don't know. Sometimes I still think about that sweater, and I don't know, it's just a really cool piece. I'm also like a big fan of Guess and what they do, as far as like clothing and like their logo, their patterns, things like that. I'm a big fan of how they make clothes look. I know that's probably not a super popular opinion, but I like what they do. So for me, I like to, if I find Guess, I'm pretty much gonna snag it. It's yeah, that's one of my favorite brands to find. Okay, Patagonia. I'm gonna put this in B tier, right above Carhartt, if I can. Actually, I'm gonna put this in A tier and then bring Gap down. Okay, that's where we're at. The only reason I'm putting Patagonia up this high is because I think the resale value is really excellent. If you find Patagonia, for the most part, if you put it up on eBay, you're gonna sell it. It has a really high demand, and people seem to love this brand. Like if you find one of the like fleece vests that they have, or fleece jackets, like you can sell those for a lot of money. And for the most part, a lot of people have those. So, you know, if someone doesn't want it anymore, it's pretty possible that you'll be able to find it at the thrift store. I haven't had a ton of luck finding like vests and things like that, especially vintage. But yeah, I think as far as a vintage brand, I'm gonna put it down. But I do think like the resale value on these are really high, so because of that, I still gotta put it up there. Also for the Patagonia, I have other brands like LL Bean, Eddie Bauer, any of those outdoor brands, Columbia, all those brands I think kind of just go together. Patagonia might not be the best representation of that, but as far as vintage goes, but yeah, I just kind of put them all together. I will say though, I think Eddie Bauer and LL Bean, like they make some really good pants that I've found, and if you can find like I said, jackets or anything like that from any of the brands, that's going to be a high priced item to resell, so just keep your eye out for that. Yeah, okay, let's see. Ralph Lauren, chaps, polo, Ralph Lauren polo. It's all the same thing, right? I think I'm gonna put it in C tier. I have really enjoyed finding some of these pieces. Mainly, I think the best thing that I can find is just the button-down shirts. Um, Back in the day, Chaps like made some really awesome patterns on button-down shirts, and I've been able to sell some of those that I've found for a pretty significant profit. Um, so yeah, for that reason, I think that I'm gonna put them right here. But I think really the only thing that I like finding from them is button-down shirts, which is great. But as far as like t-shirts or anything like that, they're not super sought after. And I personally wouldn't wear a polo t-shirt. It's also just hard to find vintage because, I mean, these are all like fast fashion brands, so it's hard to find things that people have had for a long time that have been worn in and just have like a nice feeling to them. A lot of this stuff is worn for a couple of years and then given to Goodwill. So, okay, next is Nike. And Nike's going to represent like all sportswear, or not all sportswear, but like Nike, Adidas, Reebok, Puma, Fila, whatever, Champion. It's all under this. I do really enjoy finding vintage sports brands. I don't think Nike's my favorite. I would say, I'd say that Adidas is probably my favorite one to find. Again, the clothes that you find just have to be 20 years old, so it can still be made in 2000 and be considered vintage. But yeah, for Nike, Adidas, things like that, I think the best things to find would be crew necks or hoodies. I think if you can find a vintage like hoodie or even like a tracksuit, I think that is where the gold is at. All right, next is Aeropostale. As far as resale value goes, not high at all. Nobody likes vintage Aeropostale, American Eagle, Abercrombie, Hollister. Nobody likes that stuff. For me, I've found some amazing Aeropostale pieces of clothes that are old. I don't know if they're vintage, but definitely old. And I know this brand's been around for a long time, so like I don't know why, but I think maybe it's because of what like Aeropostale is doing now. But finding like an old t-shirt with just the block like arrow on the front, I think is actually really sick. I don't think the fit is like amazing. Like the t-shirt doesn't fit well, but I just think the vibe of it is cool, and it's a very unpopular opinion. I'm aware of that, but I have a long sleeve polo that's Aeropostale that I really enjoy. And yeah, I think that's probably that. I'm gonna put it right under Dickies. Just because there's literally zero resale value to this. You could find anything and probably you will not be able to sell it, or at least not for profit. I think also thrift stores are still in this weird place where they'll find things like Patagonia and Guess, and they'll put it at a higher price, but they'll also have things like Abercrombie, Hollister, Aeropostale, and put those at higher prices too, because they think that those are still like very sought after brands, where that's just like not really the case. Van Heusen. I'm gonna put this right behind Ralph Lauren in C tier. Again, this is a brand where I'm looking for button-down shirts, even like blazers or dress jackets. Yeah, I think that's like that's where this brand shines. Maybe pants. I haven't really found too many, but again, this brand just like back in the day, they used to make some of the dopest patterns just on on button-down shirts, and like, I don't know, there's something about vintage button-down shirts that have just like, they're really thick and they have just like a soft feeling to them, but and the pattern is also really sick. Like it's either striped or I don't know, just like a cool color. Yeah, that's pretty sick to me. Okay, Lee. Oh no, this isn't gonna work. That's not good. Okay, well, we'll do Lee last. Do I have any other things that are like that? I hope not. Okay, Tommy. I'm gonna put Tommy. I have to put Tommy in A tier because of their pants. It's simply because of their jeans, man. Like, some of the best jeans I've ever found in my life have been Tommy jeans. Like, I'm not like. Also, if I find anything that is not vintage, that's Tommy, I'm never gonna get it. It's not cool. But Tommy vintage is like kinda next level. I don't really know how to explain it, but maybe 20 years ago they had like a different recipe for what they were doing, but it just worked back in the day. Today, not so much, but okay, this is, you can't see the AC/DC logo, and this just represents band tees. And band tees, I have to put in S tier, simply because the resale value is insanely high. Like, it's so stupid. And band tees, you're gonna be able to find these at garage sales, flea markets, and that's pretty much about it. Like, you're probably not going to be able to go into Goodwill and find a decent amount of band tees that are true vintage. A lot of them are probably going to be like the Urban Outfitters, fake vintage type stuff that almost every brand is doing now. I guess it's not technically fake vintage. I guess they would just call it retro because it's vintage looking. I don't know, but yeah, band tees. I have a lot, mainly from family, but I'm very blessed to have as many band t-shirts that I do. I'm pretty much never gonna get rid of them, and I just try to keep them in the family. I'll give them to my brothers to wear or to like some friends sometimes, but pretty much me and my wife wear them as much as we can, and that's pretty much like a staple in my wardrobe. And then Harley t-shirts. So Harley is hard because if I would have done this list like a year or two ago, I probably would have put these in S tier. But it's hard now because I went into Goodwill the other day and there was probably 10 or 15 Harley shirts there, all in the same spot on the rack. And they were all individually priced. So if you go to Goodwill and you know how the system works there, it's basically priced by the rack. And so like this specific item or this specific like style of clothes, so t-shirts would be like a specific price and pants would be a specific price. But they are now individually pricing these Harley t-shirts, and they were all, I believe, like $11 to like $15 probably per t-shirt, when every other t-shirt on the rack was, I believe, $2 or $3. So to me that's just heartbreaking, kind of disappointing, and I don't know really where to put these because, like I said, they are valuable, but you can't get them for cheap. And if you do, it's like the luckiest day of your life. Honestly, like they're so hard to find because everyone is like searching for Harley shirts. So with that being said, I think I'm gonna put them in A tier right above Tommy. And the reason Okay, so if this tier was based on walking into the thrift store and the brands that you're gonna find, if like you walked into the thrift store, you looked at the rack, and you found a Harley t-shirt, that would be an S tier, 100%. That would be like one of the best things you can find, by far. But since thrift stores know that these shirts are being resold, things like that, they're gonna price them higher. So if you want a Harley t-shirt and like you're looking for one, you're probably gonna have to go on eBay, or go to like Buffalo Exchange or Plato's Closet. I don't even know if they would have them, but they probably would. And you're probably gonna spend like at least $30 on a t-shirt, on a vintage t-shirt, which in my opinion isn't terrible. I would probably do that if it was, an amazing t-shirt. I know that my brother has bought some pretty outrageous t-shirts, for a lot of money, but no shame at all, because if you have the money, no shame. Like, vintage t-shirts are amazing. Like, I would be down to spend a lot of money on a dope t-shirt as well. But yeah, for the purpose of this video, I think Harley's just gonna have to be kind of at the bottom of A tier, just because, again, it just breaks my heart, but they're being priced so high at thrift stores. So finding them is like not even that cool anymore. Just because you're gonna have to spend like $15 to get this t-shirt at a thrift store. And if you find that, that's great. Like, that's cheaper than what you're gonna find it on Poshmark or something, but you're gonna have a very limited selection. You're probably gonna have one t-shirt that you're gonna choose from, and it might not be like the coolest thing in the world, so you kind of have to pick and choose. But yeah. Okay, Dockers. Dockers, I'm gonna put right at the bottom of C tier, and this does kind of break my heart because Dockers to me are amazing finds. I think there's a lot of upside in vintage Dockers, especially in pants and slacks. Yeah, I think vintage Dockers are absolutely incredible. I actually don't know when Dockers became a thing. Let me check that really quick. 1987. So there's definitely some vintage, definitely a decent amount of vintage, but I guess it would be a relatively newer brand, maybe compared to some of these brands on this list. But still, been around for solid almost 40 years now. So there is still plenty of vintage to be found with Dockers, but not a huge selection. So going into the thrift stores, you're probably going to find a lot newer pieces, and sometimes that can be upsetting, because I know Dockers is trying to like keep up with every brand. They're kind of like low man on the totem pole in a sense, like with Banana Republic and things like that. And they're doing like the flex fabric and things like, and just other experimental fabrics and whatnot. So that's a little painful to see, but it is what it is. Woolrich. So Woolrich and Van Heusen both are, I'm pretty sure both of Woolrich and Van Heusen are really good brands for women's clothes, women's sweaters. I think both of those brands are very sought after in the women's side of fashion. I'm not like super into that, but I know my wife is, and she's been able to find a lot of good things that are Woolrich and been able to sell them for a lot of money. So if you find Woolrich at the thrift store, it's not bad. It's not a bad idea to just pull up, pull up the eBay search and just type in like Woolrich women's sweater and see what it's going for, because you never know. It could be actual vintage, and it could be actually pretty highly sought after. So yeah, I don't know too much about these brands on the bottom here, but I did think it was worth mentioning or adding them. Okay, Lee is the last brand. I made it the last brand because you're not going to be able to see it on this background, but Lee, I think, is A tier above band t-shirts. And this is actually kind of funny how this turned out, and this is 100% my opinion, by the way, but Lee does a lot of sportswear, especially vintage sportswear. So it's funny that I have Lee and the sportswear in as the two tops. But Lee's a lot more than just sportswear. They make incredible jeans and vintage, just everything. They have some of the best crew necks, like vintage crew necks, some of the best like designs, patterns, just all around an incredible brand to find vintage. Like I said, a lot of the vintage sportswear is going to be Lee, so that's just a bonus. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. I guess I could maybe balance out this tier list a little bit more, but I'm going to put these two at the bottom just because I'm not super familiar with these two. It doesn't mean there's not a high resale value on those. I just don't think, like me personally, walking into a thrift store, I'm going to be super stoked to see either of these brands. My wife would probably have a different list 100%, but yeah. Okay, so yeah, this is my list. Also, I know there's a lot more vintage brands that I did not mention. So if there's anything that I didn't mention that you want me to talk about or add to this list or make another list, let me know in the comments. And if I get enough brands, I will definitely make another list, part 2 version of this, and be able to talk about more brands, more vintage. And yeah, I love all of that stuff. So anyways, thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.